This is lecture 3 from chapter 15, and we're picking up with talking about bacteria resistance to drugs, specifically antibiotics. So the video from Amoeba Sisters mentioned antibiotics, and what I want to talk about is kind of what they do a little bit and why it is important for us to use them properly. So here's the thing. The way antibiotics work is basically by interrupting the function of the bacteria in some way to lead to the destruction of the bacteria. So if we get individuals who are infected with a bacteria, so here you can see we've got two individuals that are infected with a harmful bacteria, and you also have a population of harmless bacteria, the yellow ones. Those individuals both get antibiotics from their doctor. So they're both prescribed antibiotics. Patient A takes their entire prescription of antibiotics. What you get is that the harmful population is significantly reduced. They may have one or two of those harmful bacteria left, but their harmless bacteria there are remaining, because you may notice that the population has dropped some, will be able to outcompete, and their immune system will be able to also help clean up because they won't be overwhelmed anymore. So here we'll be fine. We won't get any new evolution because those harmful bacteria are going to get wiped out. Patient B, however, you see they start taking their antibiotics, and about 3 days in or so, and you've probably experienced this yourself, when you get antibiotics, you start taking them about 3 days into your 7 days, you start to feel better. And so patient B, that's about where they're at here, they decide to stop taking their antibiotics. The thing is that when you do that, you stop killing those bacteria. And what you've done is you've effectively killed the ones that were susceptible to the antibiotic, the ones that could be easily killed by the antibiotic. The ones that are left behind are the ones that had genes to protect them to some level from that antibiotic. And so now what you have is a group of harmful bacteria that have some resistance to that antibiotic treatment. And so this is how we end up with evolving resistance in a bacterial population. And then this individual, 4 or 5 days later, is right back up here going to the doctor. I feel horrible again. If the doctor prescribes them these antibiotics again, they might be able to clear up the infection, but more than likely they're going to have to prescribe them either higher dose, or they're going to have to prescribe them a different medication altogether. And so this is how we're getting these resistant populations. Now, the one thing you can see over here, I've put in, I want you to make sure you understand antibiotics only work on bacteria because they are attacking specific structures in the bacteria, whether it's in their cell walls or in their cell membranes or in the functioning of that bacteria. They do not work on viruses. And they mention that a little bit in the other video. So you may have heard of MRSA. So here's MRSA, my little stuffed version. You can see he's even got a little superhero cape. This is a bad thing in this case because MRSA is a staph infection. So this is another bacteria. It's kind of like strep. Staph is actually something that lives on our skin all the time. We've got it everywhere, and it's normally benign. But if it gets into a cut on our skin, so if it gets into an open wound, that's where it can cause an infection. MRSA is methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, meaning that it is resistant to the main antibiotic that we use to treat staph. And the scary part is that MRSA shows up in hospitals. And if you think about that, and that's actually where it evolved, hospitals are where we have the most people with open wounds from surgeries and so forth. And so we've got MRSA, and some versions of MRSA actually are resistant to more than just methicillin. They are actually resistant to multiple antibiotics now. So why is it essential to take every dose of an antibiotic prescribed by a doctor? And this is why, because if you don't, you actually end up leaving behind a big chunk of that bacterial population that is now partially or wholly resistant to that antibiotic that you'd been prescribed. So how can microbes resist antibiotics? So I mentioned that earlier that you can have, as a bacteria, you can pick up those plasmids that give you resistance. So how are they doing it? One, some of the plasmids allow them to just pump the antibiotics back out of the cell. So the antibiotics come in, and these are just pumps that pump it right back out. Pretty straightforward. Another one is a set of genes that build proteins that actually bind and lock up the antibiotic. So basically keep it from being able to do its job. So they put the antibiotic into lockdown, and it's not able to do whatever it's supposed to do, whether it's making the membranes leak or whatever. The last one, and this one's kind of scary if you think about it, there are genes that code for enzymes. Again, remember, another kind of protein, but this is one that allows either stuff to be built or broken down. In this case, it's an enzyme set that breaks down antibiotics, which then the cells can use as fuel or food to help the bacteria grow faster. So think about that for a second. There is a set of genes out there that some of these bacteria can actually get that allow them to use antibiotics as food to make them grow faster and multiply faster. So if we try and treat them, it just makes the infection worse. So there are lots of ways that they can do this. So if they get those genes, that can make it more difficult for us to treat the infection. And the last thing, as far as antibiotics and bacteria go, just wanted to let you know that we actually use more antibiotics on treating our livestock than we do on humans. So as you can see here, right now we're using in the United States about 8 times more antibiotics on livestock than on humans. And this is because, as you can see in this picture, there are lots of cows in this case that are in close quarters to each other. We also do this with pigs, is the other big one. Chickens, almost now no chickens that are being farmed in the United States are being given antibiotics. But they're given these antibiotics because there's so many of them so close together to help prevent infections. But the problem by doing that is we end up making more resistant bacteria because they're constantly being exposed to these antibiotics. All right, so I'm going to stop here, and I will pick back up with some information on archaea that the Amoeba Sisters video will not cover, but I'm going to turn it over to the Amoeba Sisters because they've got a pretty cool video on the archaea. And I will be back with some wrap up on this group.